are listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. Before we get started, make sure you find us on Facebook at Range Minded Podcast, and there you can get the latest info, posts, photos, and more. This is episode 45, where we dive into the world of ballistic science. It may sound kind of boring, but there are a lot of practical applications that involve ballistic science, like bullets going through walls, ammunition choice in your carry gun, and quite a few others, which we do our best to cover. We think you'll learn a lot in this episode. As always, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy episode 45 of Range Minded, the Science of Ballistics. Hello and welcome to Range Minded. My name is Mark Long.
We're missing Steve right now, so he wasn't able to echo.
This is not a Steve-free episode, but it'll be a Steve-delayed episode.
Yep.
We're recording multiple episodes, and we decided to go out onto the floor while it's still open, and everybody had something to do.
Yep.
Well, except for me, but that's okay.
That usually happens. We get pulled off.
Yeah, there's stuff to do. So, but I am Mark Long.
Ricky Kasner.
And I'm Steve. No, he'll show up later. So, but today we're going to talk about ballistic science. This is a Ricky suggestion.
That sounded like Sesame Street.
Or Kermit the Frog.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what it was. Good.
Yeah, I'm not good with voices, so I take what I can get. So, so we're going to talk about ballistic science, though, today, at Ricky's request.
Yeah, so hopefully I don't make a whole lot of people mad because there's a lot of science that goes into ballistic science.
Yeah, so I don't know anything about ballistic science. Maybe I do. I don't know. As we get into it, there might be a few bells rung, but we'll see what we can do with it.
Yeah.
So, because ballistics obviously is like figuring out the trajectory of a projectile. Basically, you have something that's flying through the air, whether you throw it. Excuse me. Whether you throw it, whether it gets shot out of a gun, a cannon, even missiles, ballistic missiles, same deal. You have to figure out that trajectory and how it's going to get there and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the overarching definition of ballistics, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
then there's a lot more that kind of goes into it from there. It's a lot of physics, basically.
It's a pattern of flight.
That's all it is.
Yep. Ballistic science. So, but like you said, everything goes into that. Like, how does a bullet fly through the air? I mean, that depends on what materials it's made from.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that...
Well, and I guess, it's not necessarily how it flies through the air, but the terminal ballistics as well. So how does it impact the object? Yeah. How does it fly through the air to intercept the object, I guess?
Right. Well, how does it even leave the barrel first, too? That's a thing, too. Mm-hmm. And then rifling gets into that. We'll get into all this kind of stuff. But, because if you think about it, conventional wisdom, or maybe like when you think about it, or if you play video games, bullets go in a straight line. Mm-hmm. You'd think, but they actually don't. Even if you're just shooting it, 3, 5, 7 yards, it's not actually going in a straight line. It's going in an arc.
Yep.
Which is why, if you've ever heard somebody talking about zeroing their rifle at 50 yards and 200.
Well, you could zero a rifle at any yardage.
When you zero a rifle at different yardages, you actually can have a zero for two. Mm-hmm. It'll be a zero for two separate distances, because you have the arch that going up when it first leaves the barrel,
and then when it comes down, unless you zero it at the point of that arc, right? The very peak.
Right, exactly. Then you're only looking at one distance, but it just depends on what you're doing. So, Ricky, why don't you give us a quick and dirty on ballistic science and what you've learned?
It's gonna be extremely quick. Well, and I was just looking at more of the I'm not much for long distance. I'm very weak on that. And actually, I think that would be a cool other episode, is getting into long distance, because you can get into the weeds on that stuff. But I was looking at more of the personal defense rounds.
Right. Okay.
So a big deal that we hear about a lot in the store is
the terminal
ballistics. What is the best round to use, right? Mm-hmm. People want to know what is the best ammunition to carry in their gun, and we always talk to them about what is your local law enforcement officers use,
right?
Or agency. What is that? What does the agency use? But the best, really, the trendsetters for everybody, because they have the funding to be able to carry out the testing, is the FBI.
Right.
So you want to look at what the FBI is using, and a lot of the agencies will actually look at what the FBI has found to be the best in a multitude of different tests that they do. They'll shoot at ballistics gelatin. I think it's 10% ballistics gelatin. And they'll shoot through a number of different media. So you'll have... they'll shoot through denim or heavy layers of clothing. They'll shoot through drywall. They shoot through steel. They shoot through glass to see what the trajectory is.
Right, because depending on what media gets shot through, that could affect the trajectory of the bullet. So
yeah, and glass, I mean, he throws it off. There's a huge amount of deviation in the bullet. So anyway, what they're looking at is multiple factors. They're looking at how does the round break up? How does it fragment? How much fragmentation do they see? And how far does the core of the bullet go? And they're looking at, I think it's around 12 to 17 inches, but an ideal would be 15 inches of penetration. But they don't want over penetration too, so you don't want to be going past that 17 inches.
Right.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, because that gets into knowing what your target is and what's beyond it, because you can deal with kind of collateral damage or, hitting innocents when you're getting into a situation like that. So,
yeah. So the way I like to think of it is you have an attorney attached to every bullet.
Yep. Yeah, we've talked about that before.
So you look at a human body, I mean, just, from front to back, you're not that wide. I mean, how many inches normally?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
you could have, if you had a really fat guy, it could be wider. But really, I think it's probably about 4 to 5 inches.
Yeah, thick. Maybe 6 or something. Yeah, not too much. Not
too thick. But I mean, side to side, you're also looking, the width of the torso.
Sure.
So that comes into play if you're shooting somebody from the side or whatever, or if you're shooting them through thick clothing or whatever, through glass.
Because in the winter it's going to be different. People are going to be layered up more than in the summer, and also shot placement. I mean, you might be hitting a bone or going through, like the heart, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Going through different muscle or tissue or whatever. So there's a lot of different factors at play with all that kind of stuff. So
and bullets do some weird stuff when they go in through the human body.
Yeah, that's true.
Bill Hanley, who's actually one of our instructors.
We've had him a
bunch of times on the podcast, but he was a detective, and he says, I mean, it's just amazing when you see the bullet entrance,
right,
and he's looking all over the body for the bullet.
Yeah.
Where is the bullet? Where did it end up? And it ends up in all sorts of places.
Yeah, because
you never expect it to.
It can get in the body and then travel without leaving the body, or because there's like that urban legend, or not even an urban legend, but it's kind of an odd thing in the gun world where some people say 22 bounces around in the body or in the head or something like that. I mean, I think it was Bill who was talking about somebody got like shot in the head, like on like right at the forehead, and it like went under the skin but didn't penetrate the bone, and then went all the way around the side, like traveled around the skull or something like that, and they were fine, but it didn't penetrate the skull because the human head or the human skull can be that tough. Which is interesting. So
it's thick. Do I hear Steve-O?
I'm here.
Oh, there he
Steve-O's
is.
Here.
For now.
It's not delayed anymore. It's not a Steve delayed episode.
No, Steve is back.
He's the funny one. We need him.
Yeah, sorry guys.
They were getting bored.
I was helping customers and questions, which I never turn away a customer.
Like everybody got roped into things. So so we're talking about terminal ballistics.
Stopping power.
That's right. So talking about what you've talked about before, learning what your local law enforcement carries for defensive loads, and using that as a basis to select your defensive loads. and talking about FBI studies, shooting through different media and shooting through ballistics gelatin and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So,
yeah. So we were just talking about, different kinds of media that they shoot through to get to the ballistics gelatin. But what I found is that the FBI actually just recently adopted the Hornady critical duty round.
Yeah, that's a new thing that just happened. So, and that, why did they make that change? Did you read why?
I didn't actually read why they made their change to. Every 5 years they open it up for new studies to see. So they just. I mean, they can re-up just like any government contract for new firearms.
Right.
So you put in a bid saying, hey, I want to, put this new ammo out there, like ARM here locally could do the same thing for the FBI, and they could
computer.
They could test their stuff,
right,
and see if they could, if they liked it. So anyway, it came due, and Hornady tried their hand in it, and they won the bid.
And that's not a new cartridge. The critical duty and critical defense have been around a long time, and a lot of agencies were using that anyways before the FBI opened their tests back up. And I do like the idea. I not just only starting as a baseline. Mark, you were talking about seeing what your local law enforcement carries and using it. I prefer to go that route. And we've talked about scary rounds out there that are promoted as self-defense rounds, which I would never, ever carry.
Right.
I mean, never. Carry. And just the very name of some of those, like, I'm going to name drop RIP.
Yeah, the G2.
It looks so cool. Yeah. You stand in front of a jury and explain why you used RIP ammo in defense under a prosecution, whether it be a civil or criminal case, and why you chose that cartridge and the name of the cartridge.
Well, and even if you want to go to Hornady, though, Hornady has those zombie rounds where, and we'll get more into what their science was, but they have their zombie rounds, and obviously you never know how a jury will lean, but if if the attorney gets you and say, oh, look what they were shooting zombie rounds.
Yeah, zombie mags.
There's absolutely no need if because it's guaranteed you're gonna have some kind of
you're gonna go to court.
There's gonna be some sort of civil litigation that you're gonna have to deal with if you use some kind of defense. I mean, it's almost guaranteed. Maybe not, but almost guaranteed you're gonna have to go through the court system at some point if you do that. And there's no use giving the other side ammo, pardon the term, but there's no need to give them any kind of leverage to put you in jail for doing what you felt protecting your life, your loved one's life. It's not worth it.
Well, and this is kind of a side tangent off of that stuff, but Steve, you say you modify every gun that you get. What about your carry gun?
I modify certain things on my carry gun. I do stipple my carry gun because I want to make sure I have a good purchase on that gun when I need to use it. I haven't changed the sights, but I will change the sights, and I have only smoothed. I haven't changed my trigger out really on my carry gun.
The reason I ask is so sights. Let's just play, devil's advocate. Why would you change your sights?
Because I want to be able to be proficient with my firearm in case I have to use it in defense. I don't want to accidentally shoot somebody else.
Okay. And why would you have stippling? You kind of talked about that. Why would you stipple your gun?
Because dropping a firearm can be more dangerous than using it in defense.
Mm-hmm. And what else would we modify a trigger? What would be a purpose of modifying a trigger on a carry gun?
Kind of the same reason for sights. If I'm having to put a lot of physical effort into pulling a trigger, I could cause harm by missing my target and hitting an innocent person.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah, or you could also put a light on your gun or a laser.
We've talked about that before. Like, I'm kind of wishy-washy with lights and lasers.
Well, and it depends on what lasers you get too. So it's like you have the Crimson Trace lasers that have the pressure switch on the actual grip.
Intuitive. They call it the intuitive switch. Switch. I can't remember what it's called.
But if the point I was making was that you can argue that lights and lasers are for target acquisition to make sure you're,
and identification,
IDing the right person, that you're sure you're aiming, where you're pointing the gun.
Yeah.
So what are some modifications you wouldn't want to do to carry a gun?
Honestly, there could be some trigger modifications. I would never do any kind of like competition type stuff.
So,
like if I'm dropping
lightening the trigger.
Yeah, if I'm dropping it down, like I think there's kind of a baseline. It's like 4 pounds or something that they say carry guns should be. Still, like honestly, like changing a trigger could put you in jeopardy because you made that a killing machine. You wanted to be more efficient on causing as much damage as possible, and that really could be construed if you're down to half a pound, a 1 pound trigger. For some competition guns, honestly, are that light or lighter. That could put you in trouble.
Yeah.
One thing we were talking about that I still struggle with. So we were talking. I don't know when you're going to air the podcast episode about the 365, the SIG 365.
Oh, that will have already been released by this time.
Okay. But anyway, we were talking the other day with Sarah, who has a 365. It can either, from stock, the magazine can carry 10 or 12 rounds. Now, I have a Glock 43. Steve also carries a Glock 43. But he has Terran Tactical or
mag extenders.
Yeah, mag extenders.
Yeah.
I struggle with that, even though I really thoroughly enjoyed the 365 round capacity because of what will the jury do, and that's always a question mark. You don't really know.
Yeah.
But how could the jury come back and say, oh, you're getting more rounds in your magazine, why do you need more rounds?
Yeah, and any of that can be construed anything, even not modifying your gun, because anything can be done, and your training can be scrutinized, and your instructor can be scrutinized.
Everything can be scrutinized.
They're going to dissect every part of your decision down to the moment.
Yeah.
And it could be very uncomfortable.
Well, to bring it back to ammo, though, you could use ballistics, like the FBI ballistics tests and stuff, as evidence for carrying the gun or carrying the ammo that you choose to carry, right?
Yeah, well, so actually, this is very interesting. So when I was researching about the ammo, prior to the FBI choosing this critical defense round or critical duty round, because critical defense was first, and then they came out with the critical duty. Critical defense came out with the civilians, but a civilian population, but they found that this critical defense wouldn't pass
the FBI
testing, so that they needed it to be a little bit more robust, and that's where they came up with.
Did you guys talk about the criteria, the FBI criteria?
No.
I talked a little bit about
because some people might be curious about what, because that's the benchmark, like that every manufacturer passes the FBI standard. Okay, so what's the FBI standard? Are they shooting it in Quantico only, or what? You know what I mean?
Right.
So and I don't know are you pulling it up right now, what they say?
Yeah. So I breezed over it a little bit.
So basic, like the real basic answer is they have a gelatin, a ballistic gelatin that they have at a very specific consistency and temperature. A lot of people say, it simulates flesh. Nope, it does not simulate flesh. That is not the purpose for it. Well, why did they do it then? If you're going to simulate flesh, then you'd shoot pig carcass or something that's way closer. The purpose is to see how it performs. Once you get a baseline on a specific product and you do the same test very consistently and scientifically, then you can understand how bullets are going to react in flesh. You can
extrapolate.
Yeah, you can kind of get an idea of what it's going to do. And so they're saying, well, it gets 18 inches of penetration. Well, I'm a fat guy, but I am not 18 inches thick.
Yeah, exactly.
So that has nothing to do with flesh. So if somebody tells you, that ballistic gel simulates flesh, they're wrong.
Not exactly, yeah.
The reason why they put denim in there is because, and I think
they want to see what the bullet does.
Yeah.
Does it clog?
Is it going to clog up and fail and turn into a full metal jacket and have complete pass through?
I've seen that with wood, actually, a hollow point clogging with wood and just
or glass.
Yeah. Just going right through. It's just an FMJ at that point.
And I think we've talked about it before. That's a problem. You do not want a bullet to have pass through if it's a defensive round, because you could accidentally shoot your kids behind the bad guy when they're asleep in their bed,
or it can go through the bad guy into the drywall and past the drywall, and
a 9mm round will go through a lot of stuff.
And we talked about this before. No other obstruction or anything in the way. Do you know how many layers of drywall a 22 can go through?
Multiple.
It's like 12 or 22. It's a ridiculous amount. Like, you would not think a 20, because it's so small and the speed, it's just going to keep going.
Well, you guys have heard of the Box of Truth, right? Online?
The Box of Truth?
The Box of Truth. It's a guy who actually...
like the Magic 8 Ball?
No, it's a guy who basically it's kind of scientific, not really, but it's a guy who basically constructed like kind of a simulation of all this different drywall and shot a bunch of different rounds through it
to kind of simulate structure.
And so he's
domicile.
He started with the original Box of Truth, which was to see a 45 or 5.56 or 9mm, how many rounds or how many sheets of drywall it would go through, and how much penetration it has. And so we'll link to it on the podcast page, but that's kind of interesting to learn about too with Terminal Ballistics, because he fires rifle cartridges, pistol cartridges, shotguns and stuff, and you'd be surprised at how much this stuff goes through, how much it penetrates, like you said about with 22.
So it's really deceiving when you think that it's not that devastating of a round.
Yep. Yeah,
but science is weird, right?
Which takes us to, why did the FBI go? Because they originally had the 9mm. Why did they go away from it back in 1986? That's when the Miami shootout.
Miami-Dade. Yeah. So that is, if you guys haven't spent time to learn a little about it, and I haven't spent a ton of time, but I've watched some documentaries and stuff, looked at some of the reports. It's kind of cool. Like, it's it's not cool to get into a shootout and you're losing.
It's fascinating.
Yeah,
is the word you're looking for.
Who was this doing it? It was an Army Ranger, former Army Ranger,
doing all the shooting, and then the cops went up against him, and they were outgunned.
This was a trained person,
and they had revolvers and .38 special, right? And they had 9. Some of them had 9. 2 of those guys that fired had 9, and it only penetrated 6 inches, and it penetrated. I guess they must have shot him from the side, because it only penetrated a little bit, but it stopped right before his heart. Yeah.
So they went away from the 9mm.
And understandably, the science behind powders and projectiles was really new, sort of. Like, they hadn't spent a lot of time really developing cartridges. It was like 357 man stopper, 45 ACP German stopper, right?
And you think about what they did back in the day.
I just culturally appropriated a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, you offended the Germans.
I'm German, so I offended myself.
How dare you?
You think about back in the day, they didn't have high-speed cameras. They didn't have... Now we're blessed with the high-speed cameras where you can actually see what this bullet is doing. Mm-hmm. You have these different chemical makeups of gunpowder. When back in the day...
burn rates and...
I mean, you think of the 50 BMG, it's not an extremely efficient round. Basically, what happened is they stuck a big piece of lead in there, or John Browning did, and it's just an upsized 30-06 shell, right? It's just scaled up.
Exactly. Like, proportionately, it is a 06. It's just bigger.
And so it's not efficient. It's not really that efficient of a round, but it just has a ton of powder behind it.
Right.
A lot of power and a lot of lead. So the energy that's transferred is huge. So that was a lot of the science back in the day, is just stick a bunch of powder behind there and make it go fast.
Better overkill than underkill kind of thing, yeah.
And now they're coming out with different materials that they're making up. But anyway, I cut Steve off a long time ago.
No, you're good. You're good.
And that's kind of why now that you've seen like kind of the caliber arguments of kind of at least have subsided a little bit, I think, because the ammunition has gotten so advanced that it doesn't matter necessarily whether you're shooting 380, 40, 9mm, 45. The defensive loads really all kind of perform.
Yeah, and I was going to say it's going to start an argument, but it's true that there is not a lot of difference anymore between 45 ACP, 40, and 9 as far as the devastating stopping power.
But there is a difference in recoil, and that's super important.
But the size of hole going in and going out, there's maybe 1/8 of an inch different. There's not that much. And if you guys don't believe me, if you think I'm full of crap, do some research.
Well,
there's really not that much anymore.
So a 9 millimeter is a 35 caliber. Mm-hmm. So it's only 10,000ths of an inch different than a 45 ACP, right? So you're losing 10,000ths of an inch.
Yeah.
So really, if you're transferring as much energy as what you would, or even possibly more, and then you would in it with a 45 ACP, what was also created or designed by John Browning. I mean, John Browning created a lot of stuff.
And you're also thinking about terminal ballistics, right? Mm-hmm. Which you're going to have to calculate speed and mass to come out with a conclusion.
Yeah.
So 45 ACP, God's caliber. If it doesn't have a 4 in front of it, it's a worthless caliber.
Rob said that I was a communist today because I had a 1911 chambered in 9 millimeter.
Which is a fun gun to shoot. But it's slow. Mm-hmm. It's slow and it's heavy. Yeah, you're going to feel it if you get hit by a 45, but I don't want to get hit by anything.
No, not even a 22, not even a BB gun.
Yeah. So there really is not much in the finality of the fact that between the cartridges anymore as far as defensive load. Now, personally, I would never carry anything smaller than a 380, personally.
Sure.
22s can be devastating. Mm-hmm. You talk to guys that have been on crime scenes and stuff that looking at shootings with 22s, it's an unpleasant sight.
Well, it was amazing to me when we did our pumpkin shoot this last Halloween, and Jessica and I took some pumpkins out there and we're shooting, and I thought, a 22 will make little tiny holes so you could get really good detail on these, carving these faces. The 22 smashed these things, like it obliterated the face of this pumpkin
because you have velocity.
But you shot it with a 9 mil and it punched a clean little hole,
or a 45.
Yep,
plop.
Yep,
it's crazy.
Yeah,
because it's all different speeds.
And honestly, I know that's going to frustrate people. But it's science.
So an FMJ,
it's the way it is.
You can't argue facts.
Yeah, roughly. I mean, and this is regular plinking rounds. You're talking about 800 feet per second on a regular FMJ 45, which I think it goes more up to 1,200 feet per second on the defensive loads, something around there.
I'm sorry, what caliber? I'm sorry,
45. I think it's around that. But
mostly you're. So here's some stuff. Let's see, impactful velocity. It doesn't give me. I'm at a different site. We could look it up if you really wanted to get into it. Most of the time, your velocities are under 1,000 feet per second on 45. Almost always, you're going to be 800 to 900 feet per second.
Yeah.
So that's really not that fast. You can watch 45s go down range.
Yeah. Yeah, you catch the light just right.
Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah.
Or if you use your camera with 60 or 120 frames a second slow-mo or whatever.
Yeah. Your iPhone can capture it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So you look at the 9 mil. So why would you go to 9 mil? So you have recoil. Now you don't have the issues with the terminal ballistics.
Yeah, so time back on target and capacity.
Round capacity. You have cheaper rounds.
Yeah. For sometimes.
I mean, maybe not agencies. That doesn't really matter.
Usually, defensive rounds, you're going to be about $1 a shot. That's just a pretty good standard where you're going to be, unless you're going to like 5.56 defensive rounds or something like that. You'll be. But a good rule of thumb on handgun calibers, you're going to be about $1 a shot. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you can find them cheaper, but
and the other thing that's important is to shoot your defensive loads to see how they're gonna react. We talked about that with Sarah because I didn't know this. The P365 has its own ammo from SIG.
Yeah, SIG developed a specific micro gun cartridge.
So it's got its own cartridge, and it's supposedly all the powder burns out before the projectile leaves the barrel, and they make defensive loads and target loads. And
say what you want about SIG. Mm-hmm. They've done a lot of innovating in the last 5 years ish. They want to be a one-stop company, and they are now.
They're working.
Well, we were talking about
are.
that. They have the ammo. They have the training ammo.
You have
They have the gun. They have the holster.
They have the training guns. You can get air pistols the exact same weight, made by SIG, the exact same trigger press, everything. So you can train way cheaper with an airsoft type gun. And then they have suppressors, your ammo, your optics, handguns,
yeah,
rifles.
and their optics.
Yeah.
Their red dot is the top of the line red dot,
and
the rangefinders.
Their rangefinder. Say what you want about Leica. Leica makes a great product. Vortex makes a great product, but that SIG Kilo is probably the best rangefinder for the money, 100% for sure. But for how it performs, that is a fantastic optic. They're doing an awesome job with it. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, and honestly, that's a good thing, I think, for the firearms world, because if you can get a new shooter into the sport of shooting and say, here's everything you need, basically to get started. It's like a starter kit.
And they have the SIG Academy if you want. Yeah. And they have great instructors. I knew an instructor that used to be over there. Yeah. A great guy. And they want to be where somebody goes and says, outfit me, I need this. Okay, we have everything for your level of expertise. Yeah.
So that's a great thing. But that shows how important ballistics is too, because when going back to my original point about shooting, the defensive loads that you are planning to carry with, you need to test that in the firearm you're planning to carry.
Absolutely.
Because they could jam up. They could, I think we've talked about that. Yeah, with Nick about how he was shooting something, or he was shooting a defensive load of some brand or whatever. I really can't remember what it was. And he had like 7 out of 10 rounds were jamming. And if you can't even get the gun to go bang, you're in a world of trouble. So you have to test that out and see how it's going to react.
You have a 30% chance of going home.
Yeah, seriously, that's bad odds. No matter how you slice it.
Taking it back to the ammo, that's super important. Like with the critical duty, and I should talk about what the critical duty is, how it is different from a regular hollow point or a traditional hollow point. You have an elastomer. That's what they call it, is elastomer tip. So it's not like a polymer or anything. It's like the way they describe it is a pencil eraser stuck inside of a hollow point.
Oh, the little red dot that's on the tip of it. Yeah,
that's the best way to put it. It's designed to not clog up.
Yeah, not clog up. So you talk about your feeding issues that you might have with traditional hollow points because they're that flat face.
Yep.
You won't have that as much because the point on a critical duty round will resemble an FMJ. More so, and
super dangerous if you're worried about what's on the other side.
Yeah, and so you have that elastomer tip that allows it to penetrate glass without deforming until it gets to the ballistics gelatin, and then they had really nice penetration. So that's why the FBI. It just beat everybody else.
Right.
So.
It outperformed everything else.
Yeah, and here's something I found that's kind of interesting. We talked about the terminology. Easy for me to say.
Yeah.
So here's this website, brassfetcher.com. They talk about, and this was an FBI, he's just kind of quoting some data. So the expanded diameter after it went through the gel. So here's a 230 grain hollow point 45. So through just bare gel, it was 0.651 expanded. Okay, so a little, about 5/8 of an inch, right? So you go down here to the 40, and the bare gel is 0.587. Okay, so we're talking a few hundred thou.
Yeah.
You go down to the 9. This is 40 jacket to hollow point, 0.587.
Yeah.
Not a lot of difference.
Not a big difference, yeah.
Jump down here.
What was the 40? You said 5.8 what?
5.87.
And then what was the 9? 5.87.
And here's another 165 grain 40.608. So we're talking very little difference between the 45 and the 40.
Yeah.
See, where was the 9? I just down here a little farther. Oh, 9 mil jacket to hull, 115 grain, 0.562.
Yeah, a couple thousandths of an inch is not gonna matter.
Yeah.
In a
So
gunfight.
what did you say the 45 was compared to the 9?
So the 9, this particular 115 grain 9 was 562.
562
through bare gel, right? And 11 inches penetration. So let's jump back up here to because penetration might make a little difference there too. Let's jump back up here. Come on, computer. 45. So 13 inches, so you got 3 more inches of penetration, and it's 0.651.
So 582, 651. So you have, what is that, 70 thousandths?
70 thousandths, yeah.
Yeah.
Which isn't much.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not much at all.
It's not going to make that much of a difference. And like we've talked about before, it's more shot placement than anything else.
Yeah, that's 1/8 of an inch.
Yeah.
Ish.
Mm-hmm. When really realistic, so the 9mm penetrated
11 inches.
11 inches. The 45 penetrated
13. True bare gel. So 3 inches of penetration.
Sorry,
Ricky's just
I was
thinking.
having my pensive moment.
The gears were turning in the head. Yeah.
It's like, this doesn't make sense.
But that just goes to show you.
Well,
that,
it just has more lead behind it. I mean, you have more weight, more energy with
And that's
the
why
45.
that's why it went deeper, but the speed.
Well, I mean that could also be a factor, because if you think about a 9mm, actually, if you're shooting at water, or a handgun, a slower round is going to penetrate further into water than a higher, a faster,
higher
round,
velocity round.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for, and because you're smacking that water so hard instead of just kind of diving into it, right? So that could have been the issue with the ballistic gelatin, is you're just smacking the surface so hard you're losing a ton of that energy right away, which could also benefit.
Which I want,
because you have that that wound cavity.
So like ARM had their, I don't remember what projectile it was, but they were shooting watermelons, and the competitor's projectile, like you could see it go through as a video of them shooting a watermelon. You know, it blew up the watermelon, like it did its job, but you could see that it had hit the berm behind the watermelon. And then they did their projectile. It decimated the watermelon, and it was like 2 feet behind where the watermelon was sitting.
Yeah, so it expended all its energy into there.
But it was not a hollow point.
It was all copper, right?
Yeah, it was the ones that had the hydraulic shock.
Hydroshock?
No, not hydroshocks, but it has a hydraulic cut in the surface of the bullet. It loses all its energy right away.
It's like a Phillips screwdriver.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. It would, I speaking of which, I still haven't seen one of those go through the ballistics gel. What did you call it? The hydro whatever?
Hydraulic cut.
It increases the hydrostatic shock is what the purpose of that cut is, because you think of a motorcycle ramp, and they're not a wedge, right? They're designed to have a swoop to them.
Yeah.
Or when you're putting your thumb over the hose, like increases the pressure of the water coming out of the hose because it restricts the amount. Same concept. You're really increasing the amount of energy in a very small spot, which increases the hydrostatic shock inside the cavity, which makes it lose its speed quickly.
But it dissipates that energy,
and it causes a lot of tissue damage.
Yeah,
which you want to stop the threat. That's the point of it, is you're stopping the threat, and the idea is the threat's going to know that hurt. I don't want that happening again to me.
Yeah, because instead of that energy going through somebody, it just goes all the way in, and the force of that, it's like a blast wave of a bomb, almost like, that force of the energy comes back after a bomb goes off. Same deal, but it just happens inside the human body, which is a little gruesome to think about, but that's
and
it's the reality.
We have a lot of fluid inside of our bodies,
and
so fluid transfers energy more efficiently than gas would.
Yeah.
And so that's the point. It does a lot of damage because it's transferring that energy to a lot of places with a lot of...
It's pushing things that don't normally get pushed, especially very quickly.
And I know, like what you said, Steve, is the ballistics gelatin isn't simulating the tissue necessarily, but when you look at these slow motion...
it's fantastically awesome.
Of the ballistics gelatin, it's just amazing, the energy, watching the energy ripples through the ballistics gelatin, and there's no piece of that isn't.
And there were guys that were using clay to see how bullets would perform and what they do to clay. And clay's nice because it keeps that deformity after the energy's gone. And so you'll see these massive holes through these huge blocks of clay with usually rifle rounds that'll move the energy a little bit better than a handgun round. But at least with the slow-mo, which is always cool to watch, you really see, like you're saying, that gel just does so many weird contortion acts.
And, moves and bounces and stuff like that. Let's switch gears back from terminal velocity to initial velocity, or
muzzle velocity.
No. Terminal ballistics to initial ballistics, because I know Ricky wanted to talk about rifling. Which
rifling is important. Yeah, so that actually gets me into. Now, I didn't realize there were so many different twist rates. Oh, yeah. What did you say?
Kinds of guns?
Guns, yeah.
Look at all the guns.
I thought Glock was the only pistol only brand that existed, but some people buy Walter.
Which is, well, and speaking of that, I was looking at, it's
a good first gun.
Yeah, it's a good entry level. No, I was looking at a CZ70.
I'm not a Glock snob.
I was looking at a CZ75 compact out there, and then I was like, "Hey, Steve, I want to look at this or whatever." And then he just, "Hey, buy that 19 instead." Not even hearing what I was saying. Oh, look at that! Why don't you buy that 19 instead?
Because it was irritating you, and it was enjoyable for me.
Thank you for listening to my cares and concerns.
I don't even remember talking to you about anything.
You just said Glock over and over again.
I really am not a Glock snob. I shoot my Glocks more than anything, so I'm most comfortable with them. But I have other guns that I've lost.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have Honda Civics too. It doesn't make them cool.
With fins and loud mufflers.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have to put fins
on your race
and
gun.
Suppressors. I like the way you talk.
No. The mufflers make them louder.
Oh,
the loudners.
Yeah,
instead
loudners.
Of a silencer, you're going to get a loudener.
Yeah.
No, but we were talking about, if you've built an AR, you probably, and you've bought a barrel, you've learned about different twist rates and the rifling and all that kind of stuff. And that really does affect, the trajectory and the velocity of, and the accuracy of different rounds. And there's bullet weights
designed to correspond with those twist rates.
Yep. Right, exactly. So, Ricky, why don't you tell us a little bit about that kind of stuff?
Well, so you have Glock that had a 1 in 10-inch twist, which is relatively tight for a handgun. And in rifle, you have even tighter than that. But
and that means maybe some people don't understand what is 1 in 8 or 1 in 10.
Okay, you'll see 1 in 7, 1 in 8. There's 1 in 10. Yeah,
there's one revolution of the bullet. So the bullet, as the bullet is traveling down the barrel, the bullet is spinning. That rifling is putting a spin on the bullet.
Yeah, because the bullet
if you look down the barrel, there's a twist to the rifling. It's an actual what we call lands and grooves. So you actually have little bumps,
mountains and valleys, kind of. If you look at that, peaks and valleys.
You just think of it as a one land would be a long mountain range that's just slowly twisting down the barrel. So when I say tighter, I just mean those come closer together. So the revolution of the bullet, if I said a 1 in 8-inch twist, the bullet is twisting one time around every 8 inches of the, and that's a pretty simple thing to figure out. If you don't know what the twist rate of your barrel is, we could figure that out pretty quick.
Yeah.
But what I found is Glock has a 1 in 10-inch twist, but a lot of the other manufacturers had actually slower twists. So when they were doing this testing of critical duty, they found that they had to spin it faster because if they didn't, once the bullet hit any sort of object, it would turn sideways. It would just deflect it too much that it wouldn't maintain its trajectory.
So it would keyhole?
Yeah, it would keyhole, just start tumbling through the air. So obviously you're not going to
have an interrupted path of travel to where it wouldn't hit the intended position of where you were aiming.
Yeah, so it's just unpredictable at that point.
Right. You don't know where it's going.
Yeah, or how it's going to perform. So anyway, a lot of manufacturers now are going to the 1 in 10-inch twist. That's what they said on this certain article that I was looking at. But you also, on Glocks, talking a little bit about rifling, you have your regular lands and grooves, which are just very sharp edges on the between the lands and the grooves. Like
90-degree cuts.
Yeah, 90-degree cuts. Mm-hmm. Versus in the Glock, you have the polygonal rifling, which is more a rounded shape, more of a dome.
And that's kind of why Glocks, most manufacturers are saying this anyway, they don't really want you to use a lead or a soft projectile, because what it's going to do is it's going to start coating those lands and grooves and changing the internal pressures of the gun. That might not make sense to some people, but if you're not letting that gas pass by the projectile,
you're passing gas.
Yeah, passing gas. You want your Glocks to pass gas. It's going to increase the pressures behind that projectile, and it's going to cause a problem with your gun. Maybe something catastrophic.
Yep.
It's no good.
Which is a new improvement in the Gen 5 Glocks.
Yeah, they have a new
put that groove, the fouling grooves.
Yeah, they still don't want you to shoot lead.
Yeah,
but I've spoken to people, competitive shooters that shoot Glocks, where they're using coated bullets. They'll cast their own, but they'll harden. They're using a harder bullet, and then they'll coat it with like a powder coat type stuff to keep it from fouling. And they've had great success with that. Mm-hmm. And there's companies like Leatherhead here in town. He does that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, you can really get into the specific ammo stuff, especially if you're making your own bullets and stuff for competitions.
The problem with the powder coated, like Leatherheads, I don't think they have a very uniform layer.
I think they're pretty consistent.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing to do it so well. It's almost like they just spray paint over the top, but it's
like a candy coating looks like over M&Ms.
Yeah, or like lipstick, like they take it off. It's like, a little tiny lipstick.
Yeah, I had a guy. Are you talking about Tinker?
No,
because Tinker does that too. And I was like, why are you handing me lipstick that is in the shape of a bullet? And I realized that's his own casted ammo.
Nice. And you can get it in a bunch of different colors, which is kind of cool. Some guys,
that is fun.
Some competitive shooters think it's pretty cool to those are my bullets, because look, they're this color.
They're my favorite color.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty sweet. But you still got lots of mics. Good job.
But going back to rifling a little bit, you can even change the shape of the rifling. Some manufacturers have different shapes of rifling, right?
Well, that's what we were getting into, the
polygonal stuff.
Yeah.
I want
to get back to that. That's all.
I think a lot of people...
Mark, we've talked about this already.
I think a lot of people are... Well, and we were kind of hitting on the 365 episode is you have a lot of people prior to the 365 coming out, they were all copycats of Glock, pretty much. And now I think the 365 is going to change the game.
That size, I would say actually it would be more like a Walther or the Shield.
Don't give Mark a bigger...
Really?
The PPS, yeah.
You mean the fantastic carry gun, the Walther PPS?
Glock, it's actually not a bad gun.
I know.
But Glock was kind of late in the game with the single stack slim stuff. And Shield was the one that really was making money on it.
Yeah, that's what kicked it off.
Glock was kind of late in the game, and then you get the fanboys that's all they bought. Now they introduced 2 more models that are a little bit fatter, and they're going to need a home in my safe. And
you mean at the bottom of the lake?
Yeah,
I'm looking. So he's
up.
Specifically talking about the 43X and the Glock 48.
The 48
were just newly
and the store
announced.
The store. I think what they're saying. I think what Glock or what the distribution said is they're not going to be able. Or be available till like the end of January is when they're going to start.
So the next couple weeks.
Yeah.
Or actually by this time it'll probably be
maybe
out.
by the time you actually, because we're recording this a little earlier than that. But
yeah.
So what in reality, to get your hands really on one will probably be like February, March to really.
If you're lucky.
Well, yeah, I will see. I don't know the Gen 5s. The Gen 5s sat around here forever.
It used to be like X gun company announced this is a gun at SHOT Show, and it's not going to be available for a year. Now, manufacturers are like, that is stupid because if we're going to debut something, we need to get it in the consumer hands quickly.
When you want to ride the hype,
and so that actually they probably have a stockpile of those new Glocks, and they're probably legitimately serious. Like, end of January, stores will have them to sell. It's probably true.
I don't know. I am curious later to do an episode on those 2 guns because
we're definitely doing one.
I'm a Glock guy, but
you're kind of
what's the purpose of
this? And if you guys haven't heard about it, if you haven't seen
it, it's a longer, skinny gun.
So the 48 is kind of like an anorexic 19.
Yeah.
It's kind of a stack and a half, kind of like the idea of SIGs.
Yeah, they tried to copy it as much as they could, but they without
getting sued for patent violation or whatever.
So I'm curious. I haven't held one. I will be holding one at SHOT Show. So
yeah,
I'll get some pictures. We'll upload some stuff on the Facebook page about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it should be fun.
And then the other one, the
43X.
Yeah, the 43X is basically a beefed up 43.
Yeah, it's a little
longer.
Bit
43.
10 round magazine.
Yep.
Forward serrations. So yeah,
we'll see how that goes.
Which is funny because Glock's like, we're gonna stop doing forward serrations on guns, and then they introduced 3 models with forward serrations.
Why did they say they wanted to stop doing that?
Well, they were just gonna stop doing it. I don't know. People may have kind of slowed interest. They didn't, or it was a marketing idea. Yeah, we're not going to do it.
Wasn't it the Gen?
JK, LOL.
Wasn't it like the Gen 3s didn't have finger grooves and the Gen 4s did have finger grooves? Now the Gen 5s don't have finger grooves again. Mm-hmm.
So
or something like that.
Gen 1s were nothing exciting.
Right.
No finger grooves. Not a lot of texture.
Right.
Gen 2s. Late Gen 2s, I think, is when they're starting. I'm going to have Glock guys like, you're stupid. So I think that's when they started doing finger grooves.
Yeah.
Late Gen 2, Gen 3s had finger grooves. Mm-hmm. And kind of a weird texture, kind of smooth on the side panels and some grippy on the front and back straps. Gen 4, they're like, well, let's put some more texture on it and we'll make a reversible mag release.
Yeah.
And a different recoil spring. Mm-hmm. And then Gen 5's like, well, people are cutting off their finger grooves. We're going to cut off our finger grooves and just go back to a Gen 1.
And flare the mag well.
So it's kind of interesting how they've kind of gone back and forth on a couple things like that.
Now, and I think we've touched on it before. Glock did file a patent in Europe beginning of last year on a completely different barrel setup.
Really?
Yeah, it was kind of like the Beretta.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was a rotating lug barrel. Mm-hmm. And that was something that one of the European countries asked for their law enforcement. They wanted something specific.
Do you think they're going to introduce it here?
No. I think it'd be awesome if they did, but I don't know.
It's changing Glock so much.
Just because they filed the patent doesn't mean it's ever going to happen.
Yeah. That's true.
So
that has a lot to do with ballistics.
What are we talking about?
Ballistics.
I don't know if our listeners actually like us getting lost in the weeds like that, but it's kind of fun for us.
I think they enjoy it, so I'm going to just keep getting lost
just
in
keep
the weeds.
Going. Yeah, especially all the Glock fanboys. They're loving this right now.
Yeah.
Talk to me more about Glock.
I got to take a cold shower.
I think we've talked about, all you wanted to talk about, though, with... Wow.
Sorry,
I need to take a shower after this.
A potty-minded person over here.
What are you talking about?
Talking about cold showers.
People getting all hot and heavy. Are you getting hot?
I did not.
Hey, that's what you.
Oh my
that's
God.
What you're.
I've lost you.
You're the one.
I've lost all control of this podcast. I apologize for my colleagues' lack of professionalism.
I simply said maybe Glock guys like to shower in cold water.
Why is that?
Because they are hot-blooded? I don't know.
Check it and see.
They have a temperature of 103.
So that's ballistics. I think we've
Is there anything else you want to talk about ballistics?
Yeah, we talked about terminal velocity. We talked about ammunition choice. We talked about initial ballistics, kind of right out of the barrel. We talked about zeroing a little bit at the beginning about how...
Actually, the customers I was helping before I came in here, they had a bunch of questions. Obviously, they were pretty new to handgun. They were talking about at some point carrying. And he has a 19, and he's like, man, do you need to sight in your Glock 19? And I said, because that's a very common question.
Sure.
And my long-winded short answer was, instead of asking what was going on, it's like, well, a lot of people have problems with their Glocks, especially right-handed shooters that don't shoot Glocks low left all the time. And I says, that's probably one of two things. It's either you're over-gripping on your support hand or your trigger finger is in the wrong position.
Right.
Manufacturers, and we looked at SIGs, and he had questions about SIGs, with their optics. SIG zeros their guns at the factory. They want the end user to pull it out of the box and play. That's it. They want people to do it. Most manufacturers get their... Why is this? This had nothing to do with ballistics, right? Most guns come out of the factory unless somebody screwed up big time in QC, ready to go.
Yep.
It's the end user that may have struggles, that may need to learn the tool and how to use it properly.
I've found it, and you're always going to get those people. Oh, these sights are off. This gun was shipped with the sights off.
And my favorite thing to do is if I'm running in the range, let me shoot it, and then you throw some 10 rings out. And
Boom, boom, boom.
I've very rarely seen it to where the sights are actually off.
Right.
I mean, especially if you're shooting at 5 yards. I mean, it's like
if you're not hitting paper at 5 yards, even with your sights off,
I'm like, if you're shooting,
let's take some classes.
If you're shooting at further than 25 yards, then maybe you might get into sight issues because it's a little off. But I mean, there's so much variation in regular combat style sights anyway.
Yeah. The idea is quick acquisition and press. Target or competition sights, they're not meant to be precision, they're meant to be speed.
Yep.
Well,
but somebody that's comfortable with their gun can do both.
Well, and some manufacturers too, they because you're supposed to match up the front sight in between and in line with the rear sight. Mm-hmm. But some manufacturers I've read where they want you to put that front sight on top of where you want
and
the
we can talk
about 12 o'clock hold,
or they want it to be
you have center hold, 12 o'clock hold, 6 o'clock hold.
Yeah, so you have to
depends on the height of your sights.
Yeah, you have to know your gun too and where you're.
And I think most of the defensive guns coming out, they're just a dead hold. Yeah, you just hold center mass and go.
But it's good to know. It's
combat style sights, but you do have a lot of guns coming out now with the higher suppressor sights on them
because it's cool.
It is cool. So with threaded barrel and everything. So
you're going to have to hold those higher on the 12 o'clock hold because you have to think about your bore axis.
Mechanical offset, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So
ballistics.
That's a carbine term, not ballistic. Never mind. Oh, we'll keep going. What are we talking about?
I don't know. It's Saturday night.
Hot and heavy cold showers.
Showers with my rifle.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll let you get to that. So, if you want to know more about ballistics,
if you were offended by this episode, please email Ricky.
If you were offended, if you're a German and you were offended, email Steve at iishooting.com.
We can go out for sauerkraut anytime.
Oh man,
and brats.
Oh my gosh, you want to talk about? Oh,
that sounds real good right now.
Fantastic.
Actually, yeah.
And real sauerkraut, not that crap you get at the big box stores.
Not the canned stuff.
No.
Hey, we make our own sauerkraut.
No. Do you really?
Mm-hmm. It's not that hard.
If you want to get into the cooking segment of this show,
no. Here, let me give you something.
No, cabbage. It's my turn to talk.
Sorry. Okay, cabbage and salt. That's all I was going to say.
Oh, to make your sauerkraut?
Yep. There it is.
So
now cooking.
So
for you,
pork roast. Some people, pork roast.
Yeah.
Go to a good German store and get the sauerkraut, and you just put that like in a crock pot or in the whatever your
slow cooker of choice,
and dump the sauerkraut in there. Oh my gosh!
You just cook it for 8 hours and you're good.
Oh my gosh!
Nice. Might have to give that a whirl.
Yeah, it's the way to go because the acids in the sauerkraut tenderize the pork.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
What did you just say? The
acids.
Acids. Okay.
The acidity of the sauerkraut. Well, and you know what? We can relate this back to guns because when you use a slow cooker, you save money because you're eating at home. You can plan your meals out. You spend less money on food and spend more money on ammo and guns.
And while you're eating your sauerkraut, you can dry fire prep. Don't dry fire prep. I'm just kidding.
Hold on. Wait
a
minute. Let's back up. You're German. We're talking about brats and sauerkraut, and you don't want me to buy a Walther P1 or a P38?
Hey man, there's things.
Hey, but Glock is German too.
Glock's Austrian.
No, Austrian.
Oh, sorry.
Do not. Okay, so do not ever say to an Austrian that they're German. I made that mistake. You will regret it.
Good job.
Do not do that.
Sorry, guys.
Never say to an Austrian, "Oh, you speak German." Oh my gosh.
No.
They will let you know that they do not speak German, and
So you don't want me to buy a P38 and you're German?
Ugh. I mean, there was things the Germans did really well, and there was things that the Germans did terrible.
He likes Mausers.
Hell yeah.
And Lugers.
Yeah. Oh man.
You just don't like Walther. Whatever.
No, I complimented the PPS. What are you talking about?
Austrian gun and get out of here.
Yeah, we shoot guns.
All right, well, this has gone completely off the rails, so we'll call it a day. Thanks for listening if you've made it this far.
And hey, let us know if you do like us going off the rails and having honest, real conversations.
Yeah, because we don't edit this. We just let it roll. So give us some feedback. Facebook.com.
Unless we have to edit it.
Like that. Like we're just edited.
That's right. I cut people off. Unless Mark has to bleep somebody out.
For no reason. Unnecessary
censorship. Yeah, there's no free speech here, just my speech. So, no, Facebook.com/range-minded podcast. Email us podcast@iishooting.com. Make sure you tell us how much you hate us going off the rails. And
how much you like. You positive, man. Be positive.
Another joke. I was being sarcastic.
Another quick thing, like this year, if you guys pay attention to politics, I just want to make this quick. Get involved if you don't like what's going on state, local, and federal level. Get involved, and we're going to be talking about this more later.
Yeah, we're going to get a couple episodes in with this, with how you can get involved, and things like that.
Okay, a little caveat on that caveat. We are going to be launching our new website. There we go. Sorry, it's getting late.
We're groggy.
No, but we're going to be we're going to have a podcast on the new website, this podcast. We're going to have a forum, and we're going to have the blog.
Yep.
So please get involved, especially in the forum. If you're in a local area, or even if you're listening outside this local area, please get on the forum, because there is strength there, and we're trying to build this forum.
Yeah, and if you're in another state, so Idaho, we have the Second Amendment Alliance. Idaho Second Amendment Alliance. Every state has their own group. Seek them out. Make sure that because there could be some extreme stuff. Make sure that your person or the group that you're affiliating with matches your principles, your constitutional principles, that kind of stuff, and be involved. And if there's a lot of reasons why I say this, if there's something that you don't like, there's stuff introduced on the state level you got to pay attention to. Call them, bug them, and those guys are going to be voting it for you on a federal level. You be a squeaky wheel, because there's some crazy stuff coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I think we're going to do an episode on that soon. And we'll have Greg from Second Amendment Alliance here.
Yeah, we'll make this the cliffhanger.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Peace out.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.